I don't get it. Why are they confessing?
They're not confessing.
They're bragging.
Let's make sure that we help preserve the legacy. Ilyasa was going to do this towards the end, but she and her foundation worked so hard to keep this living institution to Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz open for the public to preserve the legacy. And we can't do that with just good feelings and lip service. We do need contributions to be made to the 501c3, the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center. And I just want to say, y'all, I know it's hard economic times, but if you can give, we encourage you to give. I'm going to donate $5,000 to the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center. I will ask, is there anybody here who can join me? And I want to ask my brother Fat Joe to come up and say a word or two while he's here and why he's going to contribute. Come on, Joe.
Got him.
Don't object, Joe. I'm your lawyer. I'm putting you on the spot. Y'all give it up for Fat Joe. Hip-hop royalty. 50 years of hip-hop, the legend.
This is a serious hater. I'm gonna match the $5,000. You know, Malcolm X, man, his courage, his bravery. It's crazy how they kill you and then they celebrate you in the same places.
Message!
It's crazy how they kill you and then they celebrate you in the same places.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I think
Definitely get a drummer some. Yeah, more should be said about this entire event. I did watch almost all of it, but I just want to show you these two excerpts relatively quickly to make again my point about why, among other things, I don't like museums, why popular representations of Malcolm X and others does not help our political understanding. It doesn't move us in directions that I think we need to be moved. And in many ways, these popular images, institutions, museums, media products, etc., end up testifying against the life's work of, in this case, Malcolm X, but the people involved. And when we're watching events like this, what should be seen as a confession is them bragging.
They're not confessing.
They're bragging.
They're bragging at their ability to claim Malcolm X while in most ways, in many ways, exhibiting and inhabiting a very different political space.
And I am excited to see him in the building this evening, as so many extraordinary people are here to honor this man, this legacy. But the person we're going to bring to the stage right now is a friend of the Shabazz family, a friend to Black people. His name is Reverend Al Sharpton. Please give him a round of applause.
This is one of the many contradictions I'm talking about. He had a relationship with Dr. Betty Shabazz, apparently. What are people like me supposed to say about this, despite the clear differences in the politics between Malcolm and Dr. King?
Thank you very much.
Or rather, Malcolm
Hill.
and Al Sharpton.
Let me say,
rather.
Tonight is a personal celebration for me. Earlier today, I told Ilyasa and Malik that I grew up in the King movement. I was 13 when he was killed and became youth director of Operation Breadbasket here in New York.
So just quickly, that's wild because for some of us who have had the privilege of speaking with folks who have known the King family, worked at the King Center, and who were deeply involved in these politics and histories, it's understood that Operation Breadbasket was, at least in part, a creation of or used by Dr. King as a place to deposit Jesse Jackson once it became clear that Jesse was not on the same political page and was more interested in a more liberal black bourgeois celebrity form of politics than was Dr. King. And remember, this is some of the tension that Douglas and Loggins point out in their work around around Dr. King's radicalizing politics and the distance it created between him and those like Andy Young, where he, of course, had that shouting match saying, Andy, your problem is you're a capitalist and I'm not. So it makes sense that Sharpton would be connected to that wing of what he's now describing as Dr. King's movement, because Dr. King has himself continued to suffer an abusive form of posthumous rebranding and liberal redefining, so that people with much more centrist politics and bourgeois politics like Sharpton and others gathered at this event could claim that legacy. So, of course, it stands to reason why, again, he would be claiming and suggesting that this event meant to commemorate Malcolm X is, for him, a celebration, when it should be, again, a confession, or understood as a confession.
They're not confessing.
They're bragging.
Several years later, as I began doing a lot of activism, I got a call from Dr. Betty Shabazz, who was a strong woman of dignity and of intellect. And no one could in any way diminish her grace and her knowledge. She was working at the time at Medgar College, and she told me, Al, I want you to come by my office. I came by, we were in the middle of some controversial case, and she said, your daughters are 3 and 4 years old now. I said, yeah. She said, they're gonna have to go to school in a year or two. I said, yeah. She said, go over to Johnson Preparatory School. I said, that's a private school. I can't afford that. She said, I paid for the first 2 years. She became their godmother. She said, Percy Sutton and others helped me with my daughters. I would sit many times, Ron Daniels, I was telling Yasser and Malik this morning, Dr. Shabazz and I would go to Wilson's Chickens and Waffle and say we were on a diet. And she would tell me stories. And she said, Al, you know, Malcolm, our house was bombed just a few days before he was killed. She said that we stayed at a neighbor's house. He stayed at the New York Hilton. That morning, somebody called his room and said, brother, your time has come. He parked a car way down Broadway and walked here, giving them every chance to do what they were going to do. She said, but they wanted to kill him in front of his family. I watched them stand over him and riddle his body and kill him. She said, but Malcolm was willing to die for what he believed in. And what we must understand is that you can shoot Malcolm, but you can't kill him.
Sure, and his politics could continue to be used for very neoliberal purposes.
He formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And many of us that had different divisions in the African American struggle should learn from Malcolm. Malcolm went to Selma, Alabama when Dr. King was in jail.
See, we can see what he's setting up here, but this is very slick, and this is, again, why it was a real privilege to be able to do that 100 Years of Malcolm series. Again, salute to Hiram and Ori for Hiram for not only his suggesting the idea, but then with Dr. Orasami Burton participating in the birthday celebration on May 19th edition of that series, where we could revisit Muhammad Ahmad's thesis about the Revolutionary Action Movement and be reminded again that this was the only other organization besides the Nation of Islam that Malcolm X actually joined. He formed the OAAU, though Sharpton struggles with the name there, perhaps as some sort of political Freudian struggle, but in the Muslim Mosque. But it was only the Nation of Islam and the Revolutionary Action Movement as organizations that Malcolm did not help found that he would himself join. And it's important to remember that because it was part of that RAM strategy to have Malcolm lead an overt radicalization of the political struggle for Black liberation. And so it wasn't just some convenient, as we'll see, as Sharpton is setting up here, use of solidarity and unity to cover a Black bourgeoisie. It was done so that Malcolm could link up with people in the movement like Dr. King, who himself was radicalizing, and further radicalize that effort so that what Ram and others were doing covertly would be able to take greater form and shape and have more support. So, but what Sharpton is doing here is, again, what Mtume put me on in terms of American fiction and the very careful, surreptitious corruption of our popular culture and imagery, and in this case, radical imagination and memory, to redefine it along the lines as a mechanism to protect the Black bourgeoisie and give itself cover for turning the Dr. Betty Shabazz and Malcolm X Center into a 501c3 nonprofit fundraiser, where those who do not support the politics of Malcolm X and the Revolutionary Action Movement and the OAAU can parade and cover themselves in celebration of someone who, again, is too big to fail as an image in Black political consciousness and the radical consciousness of people all around the world. So this is, so again, this is not just some solidarity so that we don't publicly criticize one another, so that those who are misrepresenting the politics and being the Black misleadership class, as Glenn Ford popularized, and can get away with it unchecked. And that's what I think we see Sharpton setting up here.
Dr. Betty Shabazz and Mrs. King became close. When Dr. Shabazz was in the hospital, on her last days, Coretta flew up here and visited her in the hospital. We have these divisions of whose side we're on.
But again, Coretta Scott King and Dr. Betty Shabazz did not represent politically, ideologically opposed components of a struggle. They were strong, powerful women who had both watched their husbands be martyred, who yes, to aid the collective healing of the community, and maybe even privately meant it, like developed a relationship. I'm not trying to suggest they didn't really like each other, but to equate that to legitimate criticism of false representations of Black radical politics by those who are not looking to lead those politics or movements in that way, as is the case with Sharpton and others gathered here, Fat Joe and others, is again to twist all of that into a way to protect the Black bourgeoisie. It's slick.
When all of them were on the same side for all of us.
And again, that suggests that every one of us is on the same side, that these class and political differences are
So Malcolm doesn't belong
irrelevant.
to just your group. He belonged to all of us. He gave all of us pride. He gave all of us backbone. He gave all of us self-definition. he made universal our struggle. He went to Africa when it was not even liberated states there. He talked about the Bandung Conference when we didn't know where it was. And in the division.
And he did so for the purposes of linking up the Black liberation struggle here in the United States with anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movements around the world, not to set up Black capitalist, symbolic pan-Africanist, neoliberal support networks, not to have Black spokespeople, speaking of Andy Young, take positions helping the mining corporations of the Bush family in Africa. That's not what Malcolm was doing. And rather than being honest and speaking to the political differences, this is, again, the Black bourgeoisie and the liberal wing of the Black civil rights or even liberation struggle claiming Malcolm was working to struggle for all of us. He was looking to free all of us, but that does not mean his politics were for all of these groups. And it does not mean all of these groups accepted and adopted and adapt to this day his politics. So this is, yeah, well.
When he died, they couldn't even find a church that would let him have the funeral. People talk about Malcolm now. They wouldn't let him have a funeral. Finally, Bishop Childs let them have the funeral at Childs Temple, Church of God in Christ. And he didn't do the eulogy. Ozzie Davis did. In Malcolm's spirit, we need to stop this infighting and fight those that are fighting us. When we look at what they're doing around the world to all of us, we should have enough sense to know if they can get together and put a convicted felon in the White House, that we should have enough intelligence and humanity to stand together. Some of us of different religions, some of us of different tactics, but people died to open the doors for us not to come in tripping and fighting and name calling, but to stand up and do what they died for us to do.
But again, this feels a lot like the Amiri Baraka Bill Fletcher debate around Manning Marable. This sounds like a lot of straw. This isn't just about name calling. This is about defending a certain politics and being critical of their misrepresentation and being critical of those who would engage in the very oppositional politics while claiming the mantle and the continuity of the work that Malcolm and others were doing. So I get it, but what else? It's not as if the Sharpton types of the world actually engage legitimately those to their political left. They just do these types of things to withstand the criticism from those on their political left. So it's just frustrating to see this, and that to try to call out then the differences just allows for folks to, why we created the hate awards, in part at least, to be dismissed as haters. So saying, no, we do hate on what prevents radical criticism and political organization and the politics that actually might lead to revolution. That we do hate on that. Well, we should.
These children, these daughters, they're no longer children, lost a father. And we should be here to say that they cannot lose his legacy, because all of us are part of the legacy of Malcolm X.
But that legacy includes politics that you don't want to accurately represent and that are not mentioned at all in this event. The anti-colonialism, the radical pan-Africanism, the tendencies towards socialism, his grappling towards the end of all the way towards the end of his life with how to engage socialist politics, given where he saw the movement and et cetera, lasting. It's about his determination to to ever radicalize, to build it within the diaspora, but to encourage that the fight be picked up and joined and supported here as well. So it's oh man.
And Malcolm would want us to be unified like he did in naming that organization. Dr. John Henry Clark and Betty Shabazz was at the first rally I did for National Action Network.
And that's probably why Dr. Clark would end up saying, as he did quite often, that Al Sharpton was valuable to the extent that he was like the ambulance or the alarm being sounded that there's a problem, but he was not the solution in terms of analysis and organization. Dr. Clark was very clear on that. So it's wild to see these names get evoked by people like Sharpton when the people being mentioned in this case in his lifetime was very clear. It's all on tape. And probably referenced in my master's thesis. But the point being, Dr. Clark was not supportive of Al Sharpton's version of political analysis and activism. He was a supporter of what Malcolm's politics and activism were, and they're not on the same page. So this is a wild. I'm sure they were. I'm sure he was at your first National Action Network rally. Dr. Clark was heavily involved, and that's why he was also clear and largely accurate in his criticisms and his analysis.
And I told Ilyasa I wanted to be here tonight to spend some time to show that all of us need to stop the mess and start being the best, because that's what Malcolm was about. Yeah, we weren't.
And Malcolm was not. I mean, it's clear. We again review the series if it helps, but just go back and look at Malcolm's own speeches and writing. He was very clear. This was not about a blanket solidarity on any on any a political basis or foundation or around any. His goal was not to just have a sort of politically empty form of unity. It was to specifically radicalize the movement, not to just be in unity with the black bourgeois element of it and be uncritical of it. That's no.
All the same tribe in Africa. Everybody talk about, I'm from Africa. What country? We don't even know what country. They stole all of us. So we argue about things that don't matter. One thing good about Trump is he gonna unite all of us because he's after all of us.
Yeah, I bet you like that part. Yeah, and this is this is the same thing. It's the same thing I said. I mean, it's the same thing we saw it. We just did the 10th anniversary of Freddie Gray discussion, and it came up again there. You could see these moments of crisis are then turned into moments that revalidate the misleadership class. So Al Sharpton and them came, Jamal Bryant became more popular. Everybody gets involved in the moments of crisis around Freddie Gray, and then they become reaffirmed as the acceptable form of leadership and the responsible, mature form of response. But that's so yeah, of course he would find value in Trump's victory in that way, because then all it's going to do is be used to revalidate the Democratic Party that he is so beholden to, and he benefits so much from.
So I come tonight to thank this family, to thank Dr. Betty Shabazz, and to thank Malcolm. Thank you, Malcolm, because every time somebody stands up in a position of power, you died for that. Thank you, Malcolm. Every time one of
I mean, I'm hearing it. I mean, he said every time someone stands up, you died for that. Not me, not the person standing up. You died for that. It's you could see him doing his preacher thing and his praise for Jesus dying for everyone else's sins. Jesus did that for my sins. I don't have to do that.
One of us sits in a TV studio trying to talk.
Yep.
You did that, Malcolm. Thank you, Malcolm.
Yep.
You never.
Because if Malcolm doesn't stand up and get assassinated for representing what should be our politics, then Al Sharpton doesn't get these huge paychecks to be on MSNBC to represent the opposition's politics or an oppositional politics to those formed by Malcolm, and get paid for it, and then can stand up here and be given credit for it and take credit for it.
Never got credit in life, but you're going to get credit through your daughters. We will not let the world forget there was a man that rose from the prison cells and unlocked the doors for us to be who we could be. Malcolm still lives. This is not a memorial, it's a celebration of a black man that stood up and wouldn't bend and wouldn't bow and wouldn't buckle. Happy birthday, Malcolm. Happy birthday, Malcolm.
Yeah, happy birthday, Malcolm. So much more should be and maybe will be said, perhaps on the Patreon of Black Liberation Media. But I just couldn't let the fact that I just sat through this whole thing go too far without at least saying this much. And I think this was a perfect example of the point I'm trying to make about how we commemorate hip hop, how we commemorate Malcolm X, and how we engage all of our revolutionary memory. Because this event here should be seen again as a confession, but they're bragging.
They're not confessing.
They're bragging.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.